Clara's hands trembled as she picked up the pen, tears falling onto the white form in front of her. One signature. That's all it would take to decide whether he lived or died. She knew that if anything went wrong, she'd take the blame. She could be arrested. She could lose everything. But she didn't care. He once showed her kindness when no one else did. And that was enough for her heart to remember what theirs had long forgotten behind her. His wife and children whispered, their faces cold, eyes gleaming with greed. They didn't want him saved, not because they feared the risk, but because they were waiting for his death to make them rich. Before we begin, friends, if you believe that love is proven not in comfort, but in sacrifice, then like this story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Because what happens next will show you that angels don't always come from heaven. Sometimes they wear aprons and wipe tears with trembling hands. Before the chaos of flashing hospital lights and trembling hands, before tears and whispered prayers, there was a quiet morning when Clara Brooks first realized her billionaire boss, Mr. Leonard Kane, was different from every man she had ever worked for. She had been cleaning the marble hallway that day when one of the other maids accidentally broke an expensive vase, a rare, imported piece that cost more than Clara's salary for an entire year. The house manager panicked. "You fool!" he shouted at the girl. "Do you know what this is worth? You'll be fired immediately." Before he could drag the terrified maid away, a calm voice interrupted. "No one gets fired over a vase?" They all turned. It was Mr. Leonard Kane. Tall, reserved, wearing a dark suit, he walked toward them with quiet authority. He glanced at the broken vase, then at the crying maid and said, "Clean it up and be more careful next time. Life is worth more than glass." The room fell silent. The manager stammered, "But sir..." Leonard raised a hand. "We can replace a vase. We can't replace a person." From that day, Clara saw him differently. He wasn't just a billionaire. He was human. He greeted his staff with respect, remembered birthdays, and often left envelopes of money for their children's school fees without ever attaching his name. When Clara's mother fell sick months later, Leonard had quietly covered her medical bills. She had cried that night, kneeling by her bed, whispering, "God bless him, he never mentioned it, never used it to gain favor." To him, it was a small act of kindness, but to Clara, it was everything. So when the news came years later that Mr. Kane had collapsed in his office and was rushed to the hospital, Clara ran there without thinking. The once strong man who had given her hope now lay helpless, surrounded by people who didn't love him. The way she did, his wife, Veronica, stood near the doctor with arms folded, her diamond necklace glittering like frost. His children, Dylan and Olivia, scrolled through their phones, bored and impatient. "The surgery is risky," the doctor explained urgently. "We need consent immediately. Without it, he won't survive." Veronica sighed dramatically. "And if he doesn't make it through? Do you have any idea what the media will say?" Dylan muttered, "Maybe it's better if we don't sign anything yet. The company's shares will automatically transfer to us if he dies," Olivia finished coldly. "Honestly, it might be time." Clara's heart stopped. She stepped forward, trembling. "You can't just let him die." Veronica turned sharply. "You? Know your place. This isn't your business." The doctor looked from one face to another, desperate. Someone has to sign, or he'll be gone within the hour. But none of them moved. None of them cared. That was when Clara's eyes fell on the form lying on the table. Blank, waiting for a name. Her hands shook as she reached for the pen. She could hear her heart pounding, her breath coming in shallow gasps. If anything went wrong, she'd be blamed, she'd lose her job. She might even go to prison. But she remembered his voice. "Life is worth more than glass." With trembling fingers, she signed her name, Clara Brooks, and as the doctors rushed him into surgery, tears streamed down her cheeks. She had no idea that one small act of courage would turn her world upside down and change both their lives forever. For hours, Clara Brooks waited outside the operating room, her hands clasped together, whispering prayers under her breath. Every time the light above the door flickered, her heart skipped. She wasn't thinking about herself or the danger she had just invited, only about the man lying on that table fighting for his life. Finally, the door opened and Dr. Samuel Reed stepped out, his surgical cap still on. The operation went well, he said with a tired smile. He's stable for now, but the next 48 hours are critical. Keep praying he's a strong man. Clara's knees almost gave way. She pressed her hands to her chest and murmured, "Thank you, God." But her relief didn't last long. Behind her, a sharp voice cut through the air. "You!" She turned. Standing there was Mrs. Veronica Kane, surrounded by her 2 children. Their faces were twisted with fury. "You signed those papers, didn't you?" Veronica spat. "You pathetic little maid. Who gave you the right?" Clara stammered. I only did what was right. He would have died." Dylan stepped forward, his voice cold. "That was the point, you stupid woman. You ruined everything," Olivia sneered. "Do you even realize what you've done? Once he wakes up, he'll change his will again. We were this close to inheriting everything." Clara froze, her mind spinning. They wanted him to die. Veronica's eyes blazed with venom. "You think you're noble? You've cost us millions. I'll make sure you pay for this. You'll regret the day you ever stepped foot in this house." Before Clara could reply, Veronica snatched her phone and made a call. "Yes, officer. I'd like to report a forgery. One of our staff signed a legal medical consent form without authorization." "Yes, her name is Clara Brooks." Within hours, 2 policemen arrived. Dr. Reed tried to intervene. "Madam, she saved his life. You can't—" But Veronica glared at him. "Stay out of this, doctor. This is family business." Clara didn't resist when they took her away. Her heart was broken, but her conscience was clean. As they put her in the police van, she looked back once at the hospital window. "Please, sir," she whispered, "don't leave this world yet. You have to live." That night, she sat on the cold floor of the cell, her hands still trembling. The other inmates laughed softly at her tears. "Why cry over a rich man?" one asked. Clara wiped her face and whispered, "Because even if the world forgets kindness, I won't." Meanwhile, inside the hospital room, Leonard Kane lay unconscious, hooked to machines, unaware of the storm raging outside. His wife and children were already meeting with lawyers, quietly planning how to access his accounts in case he didn't make it. "Transfer the stocks the moment we get confirmation," Veronica said, "and keep this whole thing quiet. The last thing we need is the media hearing about some foolish maid." But Dr. Samuel Reed couldn't stay silent. Late that night, he sat beside Leonard's bed, whispering, "If you can hear me, sir, the woman who saved your life is in jail because of it, and your family. They wanted you gone. You trusted the wrong people." He didn't know if Leonard could hear him, but somewhere deep inside that coma, the billionaire's heart began to stir. And as Clara knelt in her cell, praying through the night, a small miracle began to take shape. A pulse stronger than before, a heartbeat refusing to give up. The world had turned its back on kindness, but heaven hadn't. The cell was damp and cold, its walls stained by years of forgotten tears. But none of that mattered to Clara Brooks. She sat on the hard concrete floor, her fingers laced tightly as she whispered prayers that rose like smoke through the darkness. Each word trembled out of her lips, carrying the same plea. "Please, God, don't let him die. Don't let goodness lose this time." Every morning she would ask the guard for scraps of paper to write short prayers and verses she could memorize. The other prisoners mocked her at first, but soon they began sitting near her, drawn to her calm voice and quiet hope. "Why do you care so much about a man who let them throw you in here?" One woman asked. Clara smiled weakly. "Because he once helped me when he didn't have to, and I believe God didn't let me meet him for nothing." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Mr. Leonard Kane still lay unconscious. Machines beeped softly beside him, measuring the fragile thread that still connected him to life. Dr. Samuel Reed visited every day, watching the monitors, whispering under his breath, "Come on, sir. Don't give up now." One night, as a storm raged outside, the doctor sat by Leonard's bed reading through his notes when a faint sound broke the steady rhythm of the monitor. A soft sigh, a twitch of fingers. He looked up sharply. "Mr. Kane," he whispered, standing quickly. Leonard's eyelids fluttered. A faint groan escaped his lips. "Nurse, get in here. He's responding." By the time the nurses rushed in, Leonard's eyes had opened halfway, his breathing heavier but steady. He tried to speak, his voice raspy and weak, Where is she? The doctor leaned close. Who, sir? Leonard blinked, confusion turning into panic. The maid, Clara. Where is she? Dr. Reed hesitated, then said softly, Sir, she's been arrested. Your family accused her of forging your surgery papers. Leonard's breath hitched. Arrested? For saving me? Yes, the doctor said, lowering his voice. Your wife and children refused to sign. She did it on her own. If not for her, you wouldn't be here right now. Leonard stared at the ceiling, silent for a long moment. Then his voice broke into a whisper, full of pain, disbelief, and anger. She saved my life, and they punished her for it? The next morning, the hospital erupted in chaos. Leonard Kane, the billionaire everyone thought might never wake, was sitting upright, demanding his phone. His children rushed in, pretending to care. Dad, you're awake, Dylan exclaimed, forcing a smile. Leonard looked at them coldly. Save your performance. I know everything. Veronica blinked. What are you talking about? I know who signed the surgery papers, he said sharply. I know who wanted me dead, and I know who's sitting in a cell because of you. No one spoke. The air turned to ice. Leonard turned to his doctor. Call the DPO. I want her out of that cell now. And as for you, he glared at his wife and children, pack your things, you've already taken enough from me. Within hours, police officers arrived at the station with a signed release order from Leonard Kane himself. When Clara stepped out of her cell, weak and tear-stained, the same officers who once mocked her now saluted her with quiet respect. At the hospital, when she walked into Leonard's room, she froze. He was awake, pale but alive, his eyes soft with gratitude. You, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. He smiled faintly. No, Clara. You're the reason I'm alive. The world turned its back on me, but you didn't. Clara couldn't speak. She simply fell to her knees beside his bed, sobbing with relief. Outside the room, Veronica and her children stood watching, their faces pale. None of their money, none of their greed could erase what they had done, and they all knew. Life as they knew it was about to change forever. The news spread like wildfire through the hospital. Mr. Leonard Kane, the billionaire thought to be clinging to life, was awake, but what no one expected was the fire that burned behind his calm eyes. He wasn't just awake, he was a man reborn, quiet, furious, and deeply wounded by betrayal. Clara sat quietly beside his bed as the morning light poured in through the blinds. Leonard reached out weakly and took her hand. You stayed, he said softly, even when they wanted me gone. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't walk away from someone who once saved my mother's life. You helped me when I was just a struggling maid. You didn't have to, but you did. I couldn't forget that. He smiled faintly. And they forgot what love means. Moments later, his lawyer arrived, followed by the family. Veronica, Dylan, and Olivia Kane. All pretending to be relieved, Veronica dabbed her eyes dramatically. Leonard, darling, we were so worried about you. Leonard looked at her with quiet disgust. Worried about me? Or about the inheritance you thought was coming? Dylan stepped forward nervously. Dad, that's not fair. Fair? Leonard interrupted sharply. You left me to die. The doctor begged for a signature, and all of you refused. Not because you were scared for me, but because you were waiting for me to stop breathing so you could divide my fortune. Veronica's expression cracked. That's ridiculous. Leonard turned to Dr. Reed, his voice calm but firm. Doctor, please tell them who signed those papers. The doctor hesitated, then said, It was Miss Clara Brooks, sir. She signed it while everyone else argued. The room went silent. Leonard's gaze hardened. And because of that, you had her arrested. You punished the only person who showed compassion. Olivia stepped back, her voice trembling. We didn't mean... Yes, you did, Leonard said coldly. Every decision you made was driven by greed. You've forgotten that love, not money, built this family. And now I'm taking back everything you turned to poison. He turned to his lawyer. Prepare new documents. Effective immediately, I'm removing my wife and children from all financial accounts and property rights. Every asset, every company share. Every home. Transfer it to Clara Brooks. The lawyer froze. All of it, sir. Leonard nodded slowly. All of it. Veronica screamed. You can't do this. She's a maid. Leonard's tone stayed calm. She's the only one with a heart still beating. Everything I've built is worthless in hands that don't know love. Dylan slammed his fist on the table. You're making a mistake. She'll ruin everything. Leonard looked him in the eye. The only mistake I ever made was raising children who value gold more than people. Veronica's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, Leonard. He smiled faintly. No, Veronica. For the first time, I won't. Outside the door, reporters waited, already picking up rumors of the will change. The Kane family stormed out, humiliated, while Clara stood frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard. Sir, she whispered, you can't give me everything. I don't deserve that. Leonard shook his head weakly. You gave me my life, Clara. You deserve far more than money. You deserve to know that goodness still wins. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely. I only did what was right. He smiled softly. And that's exactly why you're the one I trust to do what's right with what I leave behind. Outside, thunder rumbled, as if heaven itself had witnessed justice unfold. That day, Clara Brooks, the humble maid who once scrubbed the Kane mansion's floors, became the owner of everything her greedy employers had built. But more than wealth, she gained something far greater. Peace, purpose, and proof that kindness, though mocked, never goes unrewarded. Weeks passed and the world couldn't stop talking about Clara Brooks. The maid who inherited a billionaire's empire, newspapers called it the kindness miracle. Some accused her of manipulation, others called it divine justice. But Clara didn't care about the noise. She still wore her old uniform around the mansion. Not out of habit, but as a reminder of where she came from and of the man whose heart she had saved. Mr. Leonard Kane remained in recovery, weaker than before, but more peaceful than he had ever been. He often sat in the garden, watching the sunrise with Clara by his side. There were no more guards, no business meetings, no noise. Just two souls who had walked through the fire of betrayal and come out pure. You know, Leonard said one morning, his voice fragile but steady, I used to think the world belonged to those who had money, but lying in that hospital bed, I realized the truth. Money is nothing without people who truly care about you. Clara smiled softly. And I used to think the rich never cared about the poor. But you changed that for me, too. He chuckled faintly. Seems we both learned something the hard way. The days went on quietly until one afternoon when Dr. Samuel Reed visited. You're improving, Mr. Kane, he said, smiling. I can honestly say your recovery is nothing short of a miracle. Leonard nodded. Maybe God gave me time to fix what I broke that evening. He called Clara into his study. A folder lay on his desk, stamped and sealed. These are final, he said. Every asset, every share, every estate, it's all legally yours now. Clara shook her head, tears welling. Sir, I can't take this. You've done enough. Leonard's eyes softened. Clara, you're not taking it. You're continuing it. Everything I built became rotten when greed entered it. You can make it good again. She covered her face, sobbing quietly. I don't know how to be rich, he smiled faintly. Then stay kind. That's richer than any of them ever were. That night, Leonard's health took a turn. As the doctors rushed in, he reached for Clara's hand. Promise me one thing, he whispered. Use what I left you to help people who can't help themselves. I promise, she whispered, clutching his hand tightly. He smiled weakly. Then my life meant something after all. When dawn broke, the monitors went still. The man who had once been feared and envied by millions slipped away peacefully. His heart finally light at his funeral. The entire city attended. But only one person stood closest to his grave, Clara. She held a white lily, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, Rest, sir. You left the world better than you found it. In the weeks that followed, Clara transformed his empire into a foundation for the poor. She sold the luxury cars, opened hospitals, built orphanages, and made sure every worker in the Kane companies was treated with dignity. She named it the Leonard Hope Foundation. in honor of the man who taught her that kindness, even when hidden, never dies. Meanwhile, Veronica Dillon and Olivia Kane faced the bitter fruits of their greed. Their accounts were frozen, their mansions repossessed, their friends gone. They begged for help, but Clara never sought revenge. She quietly ensured they received enough to live, but never enough to destroy themselves again. One reporter once asked Clara, "How does it feel to own everything your employers once denied you?" She smiled gently and replied, "I don't own anything, I'm just taking care of what kindness built and what greed almost destroyed." As years passed, her name became a symbol of faith, proof that goodness doesn't disappear in a cruel world. It simply waits for its moment to shine. And every morning she visited the garden where Leonard used to sit, whispering the same words she prayed in prison years ago. "Please, God, let goodness win today too." Because for her, the miracle wasn't the money, the fame, or the power. It was that love and loyalty had finally become the greatest legacy of all years past. And Clara Brooks became known far beyond the mansion gates where she once swept floors. To the world, she was a miracle, the maid who inherited a billionaire's empire. But to those who truly knew her, she remained the same gentle soul who once prayed in a prison cell for a man she barely knew. She had transformed the Leonard Hope Foundation into one of the country's largest humanitarian charities. Hospitals, orphanages, and scholarships bearing Leonard's name stood as proof that goodness could rebuild what greed destroyed. Every project she launched started with the same words written in Leonard's handwriting. "Love is the only wealth that multiplies when shared." But even as her name became celebrated, Clara lived simply. She still wore modest clothes, still cooked her own meals, and still visited Leonard's grave every Sunday. There beneath a tree that blossomed white every spring, she'd whisper, "I kept my promise, sir. Every day I try to make kindness win." One afternoon she received a letter, handwritten, shaky, and tear-stained. It was from Olivia Kane, Leonard's daughter. "Clara, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I've lost everything. The house, the friends, the life I thought mattered. I see now that we were the poor ones, not you. You were rich all along, rich in love, rich in peace. Please, could we meet?" Clara read the letter twice, her eyes wet with emotion. The old pain stirred, the memory of betrayal, of police cells, of cruel laughter. But she remembered Leonard's voice. "Stay kind. That's richer than any of them ever were." The next day, she visited Olivia at a small, rented apartment in a quiet street. The once proud heiress opened the door wearing faded clothes and red eyes. The two women stood silently for a moment before Olivia broke down. "I hated you," she whispered, "because you showed my father what real love looked like. And I couldn't. I wanted him to die so I could live richer. But now I see you were the one who truly deserved him." Clara gently took her hands. "You were young and blind, Olivia. But love doesn't keep score. If your heart has changed, that's what matters." Olivia sobbed, burying her face in Clara's shoulder. For the first time, forgiveness replaced bitterness between them. It was as if Leonard's spirit stood there smiling, proud that his final wish, peace, had come true. From that day, Olivia began volunteering at the foundation. Slowly, she rebuilt her life, not as a rich woman, but as a grateful one. And Clara treated her not as a fallen heiress, but as a sister. Years later, as Clara grew old and gray, she wrote her own letter, this time to the board of the foundation. "When I am gone, remember this. The true legacy of Leonard Kane wasn't money. It was mercy. The people you ignore today might be the very ones God sends to save you tomorrow. Never turn your heart away from kindness." When she passed away peacefully in her sleep, the entire city mourned. The newspapers didn't call her a maid anymore. They called her the woman who proved that love is stronger than greed. And at her funeral, Olivia Kane, now humble and changed, placed a single lily beside her grave and whispered, "You were the light he left behind. Thank you for saving my father and for saving me." Kindness is the highest form of power. Wealth fades, beauty fades, fame fades. But a good heart never does. One act of courage can outlive every fortune, every title, and every name written in gold. Never look down on those who serve you, because the ones you ignore today might be the hands that save your life tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Like, share, and comment where you're watching from. Because kindness doesn't ask for attention. It simply waits for its moment to shine. And when it does, it changes everything. Just like Clara did.